Hello, my name is Shamubeel Eaqub, and today I'm going to speak to you about the state of the hospitality sector. This accompanies a report for Hospitality New Zealand. We discussed the state of hospitality in terms of its spending, but more importantly, also about what's going on in terms of the size and contribution, the jobs that we support, the suppliers, the networks that we encourage in local communities. We also look at what's going on in terms of the state of the economy, whether it's the New Zealand consumers or the international tourists, what's happening with the state of business and the state of government. We also look at the supply side in terms of the competition. It's a very dynamic sector. There's always many firms starting, many firms closing. The headlines would suggest that we are in steep decline, but the data shows something different, that while there has been some closures, net, it's actually holding up really well. And finally, we wanted to celebrate one really key improvement, productivity. New Zealand is struggling to gain in productivity, but hospitality is bucking the trend. Over the course of the last decade, we've seen the sector moving from being a laggard in terms of productivity to being on par and one of the fastest improving parts of the economy. And we need to celebrate the wins that we have. So in Chapter 1, we look at the size and contribution of the sector, because I want you to be informed about the big role that we play in terms of the businesses we support, the jobs that we create, and the livelihoods that we support. Sales in the hospitality sector was over $21 billion last year. That's huge. But the impact of that is not often realized because it's not just that we have the revenue. What we do with the revenue is what matters. And a huge amount of the revenue is spent on our suppliers, whether it's the person who's leasing you the building or the food and beverage suppliers or the advertising and marketing that we do, or even the banks that support us with their financial services. So there's a huge range of businesses in the local community that are supported by the revenue that comes through our businesses. And of course, we also create lots of jobs. Over 190,000 people are employed in the hospice sector in New Zealand. It includes those paid employees, the owner-operators, and those people who are working on their own. It also includes a wider range of people who come in and out of the sector as their second job, something like 20,000 people. So we provide a huge amount of support to a large number of New Zealanders, and I think we need to understand and celebrate the role that we play in supporting New Zealanders' lives. And of course, as owners of businesses, we get profits, and that is also part of the returns that we see in terms of the contribution of the hospitality sector. When it comes to jobs in the hospitality sector, there is much to celebrate and much to fix. When it comes to the celebration, we know that the sector provides lots of jobs, it provides flexibility, and those are good things. But for some people, they would like to have more hours and more stability. And in our industry, we have to work hard to make sure we create career pathways, we create opportunities for people who want to be here long term. And it is about finding the balance between the good of having flexibility for those who want it, but also to create those long-term career opportunities, which will give us the benefit of having long-term workers who know the stuff that they need to do and give us those benefits in terms of productivity, service, quality, all those things that we desire for ourselves in our business and for our customers. In Chapter 2, we'll look at the state of demand. We will look at what's going on in terms of the New Zealand consumers, what's happening in terms of tourists, what's happening with our business clients, and what's happening with our government clients. Because each of these face slightly different conditions, and we need to understand those drivers. First up, it's the New Zealand consumer, because that's the biggest part of our market. And the New Zealand consumer has been under a lot of pressure for the last few years. First, we had the uncertainty of COVID, the lockdowns, when we just couldn't go out. Then we had the cost of living crisis when the cost of food and necessities really spiked up and people hunkered down. Then we had the increase in interest rates that really hurt people with mortgages. And then we had the recession, which lost jobs and people became even more careful. So this rolling maul has really dampened people's appetite and ability to go out there and eat out and to travel. But it's not all bad. We are starting to see confidence starting to improve. We are seeing that households are saying things are quite tough right now, but I'm hopeful that next year things will get better. The precondition for that to really come true is we need to see some increase in jobs so then people can actually see that their confidence is justified. And we need to see the wider kind of economic uncertainty fading a little bit. Because right now there's just so much uncertainty. People are scared and they're acting out of fear. Not everybody has lost in a recession, but people are being careful because that's what happens in a downturn. One fascinating thing that I found in my research was just who are the biggest spenders in hospitality. It's not very young people, it's not very old people, it's actually families of middle-aged parents that are the biggest spenders when it comes to hospitality. It's so important that we do very clear segmentation of a market to understand who are our customers so then we can speak to them and to their issues that they're facing in the current economic context. International visitors are a big part of the hospital sector in New Zealand. We are, of course, part and parcel of that tourism success story of New Zealand. But tourism has been very badly affected by the COVID pandemic, and the recovery since then has been very uneven. What we have seen is that some markets have rebounded very strongly, and there's some other markets that haven't, like China, which was very, very strong before pandemic, but is still not quite back to where it was. And a lot of that is because we've seen lingering economic issues in parts of the world. They're also facing the kinds of issues we're facing in New Zealand: cost of living, economic recession, economic uncertainty. So it's not surprising that we're seeing that, but I think it's important for us to understand that our consumers, our tourists, are not necessarily all facing the same economic conditions. So again, that segmentation of who our customers are, whether it's a Chinese tourist or whether it's an American one or an Australian one, that segmentation is going to play a very critical role in making sure we're attractive to them and we're able to take advantage of the recovery that we have seen so far. The two other segments that are important for hospitality, not massive but important, are what's happening with business customers and what's happening with government. When it comes to business, it's very much a story about what's going on in the wider economy. Because there is a recession, profits are under pressure, business travel and business customers are also being mindful of how they spend and what they spend. We should not expect that to recover until the broader economy recovers. My prediction is after Christmas, we will see an economic recovery that's gathering strength, and that will happen because the Reserve Bank is continuing to cut interest rates, the government will start to spend money again, and households are just sick of not spending money. They want to have some fun. So at some point, that is going to turn, and when that happens, it's going to feel a lot better. Government has been very careful with its spending since the election, because this government was elected on the back of a promise to be more thrifty with its spending. So it's not surprising that the government sector has been quite tight in its spending. We should expect that to continue over the course of the next year or so. In Chapter 3, we look at what's going on in terms of hospital businesses, the supply or the competition. If you believe the headlines, the sector is in terminal decline. Business closures are at record highs. Surely things must be absolutely terrible. And it's true that many businesses are struggling. That's what happens in a recession. But what it doesn't show is the hidden story of the many businesses that are starting even in the current economic environment. In fact, we've got a record number of hospitality businesses out there, and what that shows is that while there are some pressures, many businesses are closing, there are even more businesses that are starting, looking for those opportunities of when the recovery comes. We took a deep dive into the accommodation sector because that sector has been growing really fast over the course of recent years, and I wanted to understand why that was. Not only have we seen the traditional commercial accommodation supply increase quite a lot, what we have seen is an absolute explosion in short-term rentals. What that means is how we think about the accommodation sector is changing. It's not just hotels and motels that are hospitality and accommodation supplies. It's also the short-term rentals. It's those homes that are in our communities that are being used by tourists and by travelers around the country. This is really good because it provides lots of opportunities for our customers and for our travelers, but it also means that there is an uneven playing field. Many of our rules and regulations are still focused on the traditional view of what accommodation is, which is the hotels and motels. But given the strong growth and the very big amount of supply that's coming in from short-term rentals, it's really important that when we think about regulation and strategies for accommodation in the future, we think about the sector in its totality, including short-term rentals. In Chapter 4, we do a little bit of myth busting. A big criticism of the hospitality sector is that it is low productivity. Now, it was true in history that that was the case. The reason why measured productivity is low in the sector is because of a couple of reasons. One, because we tend to work shorter hours than other industries, because our work tends to be shift related, and that tends to drag down that average amount of productivity. When you look at it per hour, we were not as bad, but the gap was still there. But what we have seen over the course of the last few years is this massive improvement, and it's been really encouraging. What we have seen is that the hospitality sector's productivity per hour has improved from being at a discount to the rest of the economy to being on par with the overall economy. And that means that over the course of the last 5 years, we've seen an improvement in the performance of our industry, and that is a win-win for all concerned. It means our customers are getting a better service, they're getting better outcomes, and our workers are getting better paid, and our owners are getting better profits. Now, this is notwithstanding the pressures of the economic cycle, but that underlying trend of improving productivity is one of those big wins that we should absolutely celebrate, because when the recovery comes, we will see that pay dividends in significant ways. In Chapter 1, we looked at the size and contribution of the hospice sector. I wanted to show that we are a big industry, but most importantly, our local contribution is not just the jobs, but it's also those many suppliers that we support. In Chapter 2, we looked at the state of demand, what's happening with New Zealand consumers, what's happening internationally, what's happening with business, and what's happening with government. The overall story is one of cautious optimism. Things are still pretty tough, but the outlook is improving. In Chapter 3, we looked at what's happening with competition. And competition in the sector is intense. Even though we're seeing some businesses close and things are tough, we're seeing even more businesses starting up. And that means the number of businesses growing, and we're seeing a lot of high competition. In the final chapter, we looked at what's happening with productivity. One of the big criticisms of hospo is that we're low productivity. That is simply not true anymore. We've made great gains over the course of the last 5 years, and we should celebrate that. So what does it all mean for a hospitality business? What it means is that right now, our consumers are in hibernation. A recession is painful, but they will come out of it. Businesses should be preparing for the recovery, but cautiously, because we don't know exactly when it comes. But when it comes, the backdrop will still be competitive, that dynamism of the sector will still be there, and we need to think very carefully about, do I have the right workers, do I have the right managers, and do I have the resources to be able to take advantage of it when it comes? There are two things that I think we should do as hospitality businesses. First, we should focus on the things that we can control internally, our management practices, our training, what we do with our workers, and invest significantly in marketing. In a recession, it's absolutely critical that we market, because market share is the only source of growth. And the final thought is cautious optimism. Things will get better. Every cycle turns. We're starting to see those green shoots coming through now, and by Christmas, we will see them really gather force.